Hello and welcome to the Half Court Press podcast, the Omaha World-Herald. I'm Wilson Moore, joined as always by Jon Walker. We've it's been about a week since we last did this, an eventful week for both of the basketball teams we cover. Jon, how are you doing?
Man, I'm good. Yeah, eventful to say the least, right? I think that probably scratched the surface. We're gonna dive into it over the
Yeah.
next half hour or whatever. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's starting to we've reached positive temperatures in Omaha. So all things considered, it's warm here. Um, Even if it's only, I don't know, 11 or whatever, it's still 50 degrees warmer than it was over the weekend, which is nuts to think. So yeah, I'm good. No longer freezing. How are you, Wilson?
Nice. I'm doing well. Also warming up a bit. I actually got stranded in Iowa City for an extra day because of the roads there. So I'm glad to be back home,
Brutal.
back here in Lincoln.
Where does that
Yeah.
fall on places to be stranded in the Big Ten?
I
That's a good
mean,
power ranking. That's a good
yeah.
ranking.
That's a very specific one too. Like not just we're not just best cities, but if you see, I don't know. It struck me, I saw a bit of downtown. I went to this kind of enjoyable like divey bar
Okay.
one night. It's definitely I can tell you it seems like the kind of place that would have been more enjoyable if it hadn't been negative 18 degrees.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely not, it's not a place you want to be stranded for 3 days, but
Okay. Okay.
you
So
know,
I'll
it
assume I'll assume at the end of the school year when we have the power rankings places to be
yeah.
stranded, Iowa City's probably a little bit closer to the bottom than some might expect.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, again, I don't know that there's a place you want to be stranded for 3 days.
Yeah.
There's no Chicago, there's no New York in the Big Ten, unless
Yeah.
you count Northwestern, I guess, which isn't technically Chicago. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I was in Madison a week earlier, and that probably would have been a better spot to get stranded than Iowa City. But no,
Yeah.
Iowa City was fine. It's the first time I've covered a game there once, like my freshman year of college, but I was just in and out. I didn't
Okay.
see any of the city, so I really kind of made up for it here, like on the other end, just going
Yeah.
way further the opposite direction.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh my. Yeah, no, but an interesting turn of events for the Huskers when you were in Iowa City had just beaten
Yes.
Purdue, right? And then kind of let that one get away from them. It
Yeah.
seemed.
Yeah. Yeah, weird game. Nebraska falls down 17 to 2 early, claws back, takes the lead briefly in the second half, and then it just all comes falling apart
Yeah.
again. And it's hard to even put your finger on a specific area where things went wrong. But a
Yeah.
couple of the big ones, Nebraska couldn't shoot. Um, Keisei Tominaga was, I want to say, 1 for 5 from three. Bryce Williams didn't do anything. I think he I don't know how many he took from deep, but he didn't make any of them.
Yeah.
CJ Wilcher was pretty quiet. Just the guys Nebraska has come to rely on to kind of carry them from distance didn't, weren't on. Iowa was going really hard on Tominaga. It was clear that
Yeah.
their plan was to force anyone other than him to beat them, and Williams and Wilcher just didn't have their best shooting games. And then there's the defense, which was just all over the place. I think that was the biggest point of frustration from both Fred Hoiberg and Josiah Alec when we talked to them after the game. Just a just not a good defensive performance
Yeah.
from Nebraska, to put it in the most simple way possible. They
Yeah.
got uh carved up by Iowa's ball movement. This is the second time. And I think, it makes sense given the way Nebraska plays defense. Nebraska doubles the post 100%
Hmm.
of the time. And this is the second time now that they've gotten sliced up by a team with a really good passing big man. I think that's, that is never going to be a good matchup for Nebraska just because of the way they play. And if there's someone with a skill set to counter that, like Stephen Crowell, or Iowa had Ben Krikke and Owen Freeman, that's
Yeah.
just going to be a rough matchup. So Iowa moved the ball really well. They set up open looks, got open shots, hit 3-pointers, got to the rim, ended in a rough, you know, a bumpy landing for
Yeah.
Nebraska after what looked to be, a season defining win over Purdue a few days before that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've discovered is from afar is like obviously if you want to have a chance at beating Nebraska, you have to somehow keep Keisei Tominaga quiet,
Yeah.
which obviously that's every team's game plan. Some teams are able to do that, some teams are not. But that kind of seems like where it could start. Because yeah, then if you get guys like Wilcher and I know Gary kind of we'll dive into that here in a
Yeah,
few
we'll
minutes.
talk about it
I'm
now.
assuming. But if you're, down Gary and guys like Wilcher are not hitting at the pace that they've been, then yeah, I mean it could be any night with that recipe could be a rough night for Nebraska, I think.
Yeah.
Just because I think the Huskers go as Casey and Rick Mass take them.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, so I think Rink Mast has probably been a sure thing most nights.
Yeah.
But if teams are gonna hedge everything that Casey's involved in, and he can make them, but I'd assume
Yeah.
Fred and them don't want him shooting everything from 25 plus.
Yeah.
And that's it seemed like again I watched the last little bit of the Rutgers game that we'll talk about, and that's kind of what it seemed like Rutgers tried to do.
Yeah.
Um, and he just missed the mark on the ones that he had open. It just kind of snowballed on top of him. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The defense hasn't been a problem for the Jays.
No,
Um,
it hasn't.
we saw that last Saturday against St. John's, eked out a 66-65 win. Um, their offense was not really all that good in this game. Um, if it weren't for the very, very, very bad blunder in Kansas City against Colorado State, uh, Saturday's game against St. John's would have been Creighton's, biggest or worst offensive output of this season, in terms of numbers wise. And then they follow that with a stinker in UConn that we'll dive into. But I guess just to isolate the St. John's game, like I know Greg McDermott sat down right after the game, and the first thing that he said in his opening statement was, we've been accused of not being able to win a mud fight, and today we did. And it's like I'm probably in the camp that says that was a win in that fashion that was necessary for this team moving forward, because they'd traded blows down the stretch of a game. Marquette, Villanova, had not been able to land the last blow, and they narrowly. Trey Alexander goes to the line, hits a pair with 12.3 seconds left. Narrowly did it against St. John's, but those are kind of the wins you have to have in the Big East. And St. John's, it's kind of proven to be better than maybe some people thought. I think Rick Pitino's probably turned them around a lot quicker than most people figured he would. Really navigated the portal. They have two returners. Joel Soriano is obviously the big one. Man, that was my alarm to wake up. Isn't that nuts? It was in a case of emergency alarm. But yeah, no, I just that was a win that was necessary for them in that fashion, to be able to just scrap and claw and trade blows for 40 minutes. I mean, they were down 9 with 9 minutes left. That team, or I guess not that team, this team before that game would have most likely folded in some moments. We saw them get down early and crumble against UNLV, which played really well that night, but kind of still to the point. Kind of buckled when Villanova stormed back in overtime. buckled a little bit when Marquette stormed back in Milwaukee, and so for them to just be able to gut one out for once was really good for them, I think. Um, and they finally, as Greg McDermott said, won a mud fight. I don't think I've ever heard that one. A
Yeah,
mud
I don't know
fight?
that
Have
I
you?
have either.
Rock fight, fist fight,
Yeah.
street fight, mud fight. Yeah, I'm not sure if
Huh.
I've heard that one,
It's kind of
but
fun.
I haven't.
I like the imagery of that.
Yeah. And it kind of seems accurate for the Big East, just like going at aside from Georgetown and DePaul, it seems like the other 9 teams just bludgeon each other on a nightly basis. So yeah, mud fight's probably a good way to describe the Big East, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point about how that Creighton needed a win like that because it
Yeah,
feels like they should have the personnel for games like
yeah,
that. Like
yeah, yeah.
I think if I'm putting together a basketball team and I want to win, a shootout, where everyone's making threes on their head.
Yeah,
I want Trey Alexander, I want Stephen Ashworth when he's feeling it.
yeah,
For a mud fight like that, you want Ryan Kalkbrenner in that game. Like that's what he's built for.
yeah. You know, eh, I'm thinking as of late, Stephen Ashworth has not consistently hit shots. And so, recently that's been Francisco Farabello off the bench, bringing just like a dog mentality, if you will, the Juwan Gary method.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's Baylor Shireman on the wing. It's Ryan Kalkbrenner, exactly. So yeah, that was obviously good for them, and it didn't translate to Wednesday, unfortunately for the Jays. So we'll see.
Do you
But
do
oh,
you
go
want to
ahead.
talk about that Wednesday game? That felt like a
Yeah, do
good
we want to?
transition.
Yeah. It was. I don't know if Creighton fans will like what I have to say, but I. So Creighton, we'll dive into it, and then I'll kind of give the Jon Walker analysis, if you will. Although most people didn't agree with me last night, so we'll see if that's still the case on this here podcast. Yeah, Creighton absolutely throttled by UConn in source, 62-48. Late scoring spurt by the Jays made that game a lot closer than it felt. Because it certainly, it was for most of the game, and it certainly felt like a 20 plus point game. Because UConn is the reigning national champ and expected to maybe repeat for a reason. Repeat again for a reason. My connection glitched there for a second, so sorry. But yeah, they look the part of a team that wants to repeat. UConn did, and the crazy thing to me is Creighton knew going into the St. John's game, to back up a little bit, that rebounding was going to be the difference. It was only that win ended up being the second game this year that Creighton has not won on the glass, and won the game. So, pretty big stat for this team. If they're gonna win on the board, if they're gonna win, they have to win on the boards. Otherwise, it's not looking so hot. So they knew that would also be an emphasis going into UConn, the number one team in the country for the first time since, I don't know, The Dark Knight came out. March
Is
2009.
the Hashim Thabit era, as some of us like to call it? Or
Yeah,
did I get that year right?
yeah, yeah, I think so. That would have been like right after, or I don't know when were no, Kemba and them were later, huh?
Yeah, Kemba was like 2012.
Third, yeah,
And then
yeah.
Shabazz Napier was 14, I believe.
Shabazz Napier, 2014. Yep. Shabazz Napier. That's crazy. What a
I
name.
loved Shabazz
Um,
Napier because every jump shot he took was a fadeaway, whether it needed to be or not.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's crazy.
Okay, but
But yeah,
anyway.
yeah, UConn, just kind of crashed the glass, completely out hustled Creighton on the boards. There was one, I think it was either Stephon Castle or Tristan Newton, one of UConn's guards. Like they put up a shot, doesn't go, it bounces off, and it's about to bounce like right in front of a Creighton player. And he like cuts in between that player and Ryan Kalkbrenner, dives on the ball right on the baseline. Crowd gets fired up. They get the rebound. It's just like those are the type of plays you have to have in a game like that to just have some juice. And UConn certainly had those. But the craziest thing to me is, yes, Creighton lost this game on the glass. Yes, Creighton lost this game when they had twice as many turnovers as UConn. But UConn's defense, I keep coming back to the word like mugged because it the Huskies were in the Jays grill all night long. And that was probably the shocking thing to me. So many late shot clock opportunities for Creighton, and it was because the Jays struggled to get into their sets, to get into the flow of their offense. And when you're going to hit 6 of 26 threes, a team that's predicated, kind of built on its shot making, and you go 6 of 26 from outside, it's probably going to be a rough night. I tweeted this out a little bit ago, actually. I think this is a pretty good way to describe what happened in stores. Okay, so Creighton fell a couple of spots to 15th in Ken Palm, 4 spots to 15th in the net. But I looked at the offensive and defensive efficiency numbers. Wilson, a week ago from today, Creighton was 14th in offensive efficiency. The Jays entered last night 24th, and this morning they are 43rd. So they fell 29 spots in offensive efficiency over the past week. Just to kind of paint the picture of how rough these past 2 games have been on that end of the floor. Defensively, which is kind of the thing that I think the Jays can take solace in. Their defense held UConn to, let's see, 35.7% from the field. Made them go 25 of 70. And I know you hear 70 shots and you're like, in a college basketball game, well, that's what 21 offensive rebounds will do for you. But Creighton went up from 12th to 6th in defensive efficiency from Wednesday to Thursday. So, defended their wings off, if you will. But they've got to find answers on the offensive end when teams are going to bring pressure, because that's what they've struggled with so far. UNLV, Colorado State, Villanova, they've struggled when teams want to play pressure ball, and I don't know what the fix is. Maybe get Stephen Ashworth to the rim a little bit more, like create a threat that he's a driving guard. But otherwise, I think they're getting good looks, but they're not knocking them down. And then when they're not, teams are kind of clogging the lane and not allowing Ryan Kalkbrenner to get going down low. So just kind of a recipe for disaster for the Jays in stores, who, they defended well enough to win. Every other aspect of the game did not play well enough to beat the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah. Well, I missed that game because I was
right.
But until you talked about the offensive performance and the offensive rebounding of UConn, I did not realize how similar Creighton's performance was to Nebraska's last night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nebraska lost to Creighton in a game that it absolutely could have won. And if you're trying to diagnose what happened, I think you come to two things. One is the 25 offensive rebounds from Rutgers. And
dude, it's a killer. It's a killer. You can't guard for, I'm assuming they play really good defense. I've seen Nebraska play defense. They play pretty good defense. And so if you're playing that for 25 seconds and they put a shot, you force a bad shot and they get the offensive board, it's exhausting.
Yeah,
It's a momentum killer. And that happens to Creighton. It has happened to Creighton far too often this season. And obviously happened in Nebraska. So that just these two teams struggle with that, man. I don't know
yeah,
why, but
yeah,
defensive rebounding most nights is not it. Or I say most nights, maybe just in big situations, is like not delivering for whatever reason. And they both have good big men, Ryan Kalkbrenner and
yeah,
Rick Nass. So
yeah.
it's it's one of those baffling things.
Yeah, yeah, that is, what's part of what's strange about this being an issue, not just last night. I mean, it was more of an issue last night than it has been all
All right.
season for Nebraska, but it's that they've had problems with it throughout the year. And yeah, but this is a team with Rink Mass, Josiah Alec, and Juwan Gary, who again we'll get to. It should be on paper a better rebounding team than it's shown night in, night out. Mast got just swallowed up by Cliff Omori last night. Like that was Mast has been, I think, Nebraska's MVP through this first half of the season,
For sure.
roughly. But he was bothered by Omori's length last night. You could tell Omori was going over him, getting through him, getting those rebounds, throwing home dunks in his face. Um it was a rough day for Mast last night. Rough day last night. That sounded weird. But anyway, and
And
then
that's kind of to the like I really think, I think Creighton goes as Trey Alexander, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and Baylor Shireman go. And I really just think Nebraska goes as Rick Mast and Casey Tominaga do.
yeah,
So,
yeah, that's it.
that's just kind of one of those another one of those instances where it's like wins are no longer layups in college
Yeah,
basketball. Like there are
yeah,
very few DePauls laying around on the
yeah,
schedule, especially when you get to this time of year. And that is like one of your star players, whether it be Casey or Rink Mast, or I think a little bit of last night, maybe both. If
yeah,
they're not hitting, it's so, so, so tough to win in the Big Ten, so tough to win in the Big East. It's they're gauntlets. You
yeah,
got to be your best.
yeah. And I think there's even with all that, it's kind of incredible as I think about it now that Nebraska was still in position to win the game after going 6 minutes without a field goal in the first half
Yeah,
and 9 minutes
that
in the second half. Like, I mean, I wrote last night there were so many different opportunities they could have sealed the game. Mass missed a wide open three from the corner that would have put them up four with about 30 seconds left. They tried to, they had the ball with like 17 seconds left and tried to get into a set. And Hoiberg said after the game they got into it too early, and then Bryce
that's what I
Williams
thought too. Watching it,
dribbled it off his foot. Yeah. So many opportunities that just slipped through Nebraska's fingers.
um,
And just the yeah. And
yeah, I like I said, I caught the last like 10-ish minutes of that Nebraska Rutgers game, and I thought the same thing before he dribbled the ball off his foot. I was like, he might be a bit early for what you're trying to do here. Like, even if it's a couple seconds, that's
yeah,
if everybody else thinks you're going to get into the set at 7 seconds, I think is about average.
yeah,
And you go a tad early, it could throw everything off. So that's kind of what I noticed. But two double-digit leads, is that
yeah.
right?
That's
Am I
just
tripping?
yeah, that yeah. I think 12 points in each half, and that's just that can't happen with a team as experienced as Nebraska. Like
No.
they brought in these transfers for moments like that. So to not fall apart in those kinds of moments, and that's what happened last night. And even with
Yeah.
all that, the crazy thing, and I think Nebraska still wins that game. If Juwan Gary doesn't leave with an injury in the
Yeah.
second
Yeah.
half.
You want to
Because
touch on that a little bit? I
yeah,
mean, that's a
yeah,
potential pretty big blow for the
yeah,
Huskers.
yeah. I mean, first, just the immediate effects of last night. Uh, obviously the game went into overtime, so it was tied in regulate at the end of regulation. Uh, Rutgers had 25 offensive rebounds, 20 second chance points. You got to figure if Gary is out there for the whole second half, he is good for preventing one of those offensive rebounds
Yeah.
and two of those second chance points. But then, yeah, I mean, if he's out for an extended period of time, which I'm not a doctor. A bunch of people on Twitter who are also not doctors were speculating it was Achilles, but I I assume we'll talk to Fred tomorrow and get an update. And
Yeah.
I know Nebraska's holding its breath on this one because he's important. He brings some grit. He this season he started making shots too.
Yeah.
He we saw him put Nebraska on his back in the Kansas State game, just attacking the offensive glass. He's a guy who can, he's a guy you want in a game like last night where
Yeah. A mud
um
fight.
yeah, in a mud fight, yeah. And I mean, and even, beyond just the basketball uh, you know, impl implications, I think about, I wrote a feature on Juwan, and I just think about when him telling me about how many injuries he's dealt with and how he's totally healthy, his shoulders all good, like how he's feeling
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
and this is everything's going well for him. So just thinking
That was
about
like
that,
less than a month ago, right?
yeah, that was like just mid-December, yeah, and you hear that, you read about that, and that just makes it really tough, and you really feel for
Yeah.
a guy who has a backstory like that, who's dealt with a lot of injuries, and then you see this happen on a just a fluke, inexplicable,
Yeah.
non-contact, just running down the court, and something just went wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. He is I think we mentioned a dog
He
earlier.
is a
Somebody
dog.
could bring
Yeah,
a dog on crate. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Juwan Gary, dog.
His favorite word is dog. Like that is
Yeah,
how
yeah,
he.
and rightfully so. He's got to have it
Yeah,
tattooed somewhere, right?
he's got to. Yeah, I mean,
Dog,
yeah,
bicep on the bicep of the
yeah.
shooting arm. Oh my, who's Nebraska get this week?
Nebraska's
Oh,
got a
North. Yeah,
Northwestern. Yes, back at Pinnacle Bank Arena, which I'm sure
that'll be good
Nebraska
for them.
is very happy to get back there after the road has been something of a house of horrors over the
Hmm.
past couple months. So they've got a good opportunity ahead of them in Northwestern. It's a Wildcats are a good team, probably going to be a tournament team. So a win would be a nice resume booster, um nice addition to the season. Nice way to kind of get this team back on track. Won't be easy. Boo Buie and Jameer Young on Maryland, who Nebraska faces after. I forget if they've got a game in between or if it's right back on the road. But anyway, you know, two of the best guards in the league. Boo Buie is
Yeah,
is a guy who can put a team on his shoulders for extended periods of time. He can make shots. He can get to the rim. He's fantastic. So Nebraska's kind of got its work cut out for him. I wonder who is going to guard Bowie, but it'll be either Jamarcus Lawrence or Bryce Williams.
yeah.
And big opportunity. They're also honoring the 93-94 team that won the Big Eight tournament um, before the game, or at some point during the game. Danny Nee will be back. I've got kind of a fun story looking back on that team.
Okay.
So if the listeners still paying attention, watch for that. So yeah, lots. Lots happening. Pinnacle Bank Arena on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that'll be fun. That'll be good for them to get back home. It just, I
Been
think
a lot better there.
yeah, I think your story described as Jekyll and Hyde.
Yep. Yeah.
That is there a more perfect comparison for Nebraska on the road versus at home?
Yeah.
Like, no, there's not. Like that sums it up pretty well. Which, yeah, we'll see. Creighton's got Seton Hall on Saturday in Newark. Um, I don't think in November, when anybody looked at the schedule, they would have said, man, that Seton Hall game is uber, uber, uber important. And now Seton Hall is like 5-1 in the Big East, is responsible for UConn's only league loss. Like Shaheen Holloway has them rolling right now. It's interesting because I guess to look ahead just a tad, if you look at all the metrics, it would tell you they would tell you that Seton Hall is just okay and their record is better than the team they actually are. And if you look at Xavier, Creighton's opponent on Tuesday, quick turnaround, it would tell you the exact opposite. The metrics would say Xavier is really good and just hasn't won games. So it's weird. You never really know what to expect from Seton Hall. They can get hot from outside and just rely on that. Of course, we're talking about Big East basketball, so they can go down low and try and win a game on the block in a mud fight.
A mud fight.
In a mud fight, and yeah, but I really 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 think that if Creighton, I'm talking to anybody aside from UConn right now. If you want to finish atop the league, because I think UConn's probably the far and away favorite. But if you want to finish atop this league, which would then be second, it's going to come down to winning head-to-head matchups against like Seton Hall and St. John's, Villanova, and Marquette. Like those are probably the four teams I see finishing like 2 through 5, I guess. And so Saturday is a long way toward kind of finishing in the Big East where you want to finish first, right? But again, I just think UConn is I think UConn so far has played the part of a team that wants to repeat and is capable of repeating. So if you still want to finish the top, close to the top of the Big East, you've got to win in this cluster, and that kind of starts Saturday with Seton Hall. So
yeah. Well, I think that that about wraps it up. That sums it up. I think we hit on everything.
yeah,
We hit on what happened this week for each team, what's happening next.
I'm gonna go hop in the shower and get all this mud off me.
Oh yeah, gotta. Well,
Oh,
I'm gonna start just incorporating the word mud fight into non-basketball related conversations and see if anyone notices.
Man, I'm trying to get through the aisles at Walmart. This is
Just a mud fight in here.
This is just a mud fight. I'm Christmas shopping, man. Trying to do whatever. I don't know. It's a mud fight out here. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, we've got to start. Shout out Greg McDermott for that one. I've never heard it. I have now, and so will everyone else.
All right. Thank you for listening. This has been the Half Court Press podcast.